macromolecules. So just some little chemistry terms that are going to sneak their way into biology here. We want to understand how chemical reactions work. We have reactants and products. Reactants are the molecules that go into a chemical reaction, and products are the molecules that come out. The atoms aren't created or destroyed here, they're just rearranged into new things. What we're concerned about here is understanding how energy plays a role in, or how proteins that are called enzymes are going to play a role in impacting the rate of these chemical reactions. So if we look at this chemical reaction, it's tracking the energy in the system. Our reactants are at level A, our products are at level C. This is going to give off energy, this reaction. To get the reaction to start, we have to get it to the level of B. Now, the type of energy that's most available to your cells to cause chemical reactions to happen is heat energy. If the heat energy of your cell only gets to here, this chemical reaction will never happen on its own because it doesn't get up over the top of that level. But we can have enzymes that your cells make that we can release. And when we release those cells, it can lower this hump right here. We call it the energy of activation. If it lowers that energy of activation, as is depicted here, if it lowers it down low enough that the heat of your body can trigger it, now all of a sudden that chemical reaction can happen. Now think about the level of control that gives your cells, right? It can cause reactions to happen when it wants by producing the enzymes that are needed. And when those enzymes do their job, we get the reaction that we want. That level of control is going to be really helpful for maintaining homeostasis, the ideal conditions of the cell. And so that's one of the key things to learn here. Enzymes are a part of a class of macromolecule called a protein. Proteins are building blocks for organisms, how they put themselves together, in addition to controlling their enzyme reactions. Proteins are made up of a smaller subunit. We call that the monomer. So proteins are going to be the polymer. Now, there's another name for a protein polymer that's called a polypeptide. I want to look down here. Yeah. So the protein polymer is polypeptide. Amino acids are the repeating units that make up the polymer. So the repeating unit, we call that the monomer. So amino acids link together to form proteins, and their job is structure of the cell as well as some enzyme activity. Yes, a grape would absolutely have that. The next class of protein is called a carbohydrate. Carbohydrates are sugars. They're called carbohydrates because there's a bunch of carbons. Each angle on this little ring here represents a carbon, unless otherwise noted, like there's an oxygen there. So there's a carbon here, 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 and then another one sticking off here. 6 carbons in this ring linked together with an oxygen here. And then look at all the hydrogens and oxygens coming off of here. Hydrate, right? Water. We're going to have lots of water that went into forming this. So that's where the name carbohydrate comes from. Now, the monomer of a carbohydrate is monosaccharide. And if we take 2 monosaccharides and link them together, those are called disaccharides. And if we link more and more of them together, we get to polysaccharide. Polysaccharide could be thousands of monosaccharides long. And so we can get these big long chains. One of them is starch. So those breads and potatoes, right? They're really heavy in these starches. Now, if you look, this is just the glucose linked together over and over again to form to go from monosaccharide to polysaccharide. When these link together, though, notice the oxygen is always in that top right position over and over and over again. A different kind of sugar, cellulose, the oxygen is in that top right position, and then it switches its orientation slightly, right? It changes the way it links together. You see the angle of that bond. That link between those being at a different angle changes the structure entirely, right? Starches, your body can break down using an enzyme and produce lots of sugars and ultimately lots of energy for you in your cells. Cellulose, because of that angle, it will not let it, you don't have an enzyme to break that down. And as a result, if you eat things that have lots of cellulose, even though the same monomer is there, it's sugar, it's glucose in both, you can't break that down. This would be what you would call fiber in your diet. Okay, the cell walls of plants are made out of cellulose, and that is going to prevent you from being able to get energy from those. Now, there are some organisms that have some helpers that will help them break that down. Humans don't, and so we can't get much energy from cellulose at all. All right, so polymer for carbohydrates is a polysaccharide, monomer, monosaccharide. The purpose for these in animals is primarily sugar. In plants, it can be part of that cell wall too, so it can be how they build their body. And then, yes, grapes would absolutely have that. They'd have monosaccharides and polysaccharides both. Okay, next is lipids. Lipids can come in a variety of forms. The most basic example of it is a triglyceride. They're going to have two components to them. It doesn't really work to call them monomers because it's not really the same thing. They're not the same unit linked over and over again. There are subunits that make up the triglyceride. So we're going to have fatty acid tails, 3 of them. That's where the tri comes in. And then we're going to have a glycerol head that's attached over here. So those 3 long tails are made out of carbon and hydrogen. We're not going to have oxygens mixed in like we did with the carbohydrates. We're going to have these big long tails of just carbon and hydrogen. And that is going to give us our triglycerides. Now, there's some other lipids that are really important. For example, a phospholipid. It's going to have a phosphate group instead of this 3rd tail. So where that 3rd tail would attach as a phosphate group there. So that ends up having only 2 tails coming off and a phosphate head. That's what our membranes are made out of. So there is some structural importance to lipids, but most of what lipids are doing is serving as a energy storage molecule. So we're going to build these to store the energy that we don't use. But some of it is used for cell membranes. All right. And our last one is called the nucleic acid. Nucleic acids are the macromolecules, the polymer. They're made up of nucleotides. That's the monomer. Nucleotides are going to consist of a phosphate, a ribose sugar, and a nitrogenous base. There's 4 forms of it that DNA can have, A, C, T, and G. And that's going to be what a nucleic acid is. So nucleic acid is the polymer. We link together nucleotides that are the monomers. And the purpose of those is genetic information storage. And yes, grapes would definitely have those as well.